This was the one that I did last year, right here. And you can see some of the things that I've used to create that illusion. First of all, I've got little elements that are going into perspective. And I've tried to connect them, look like there's something snaking its way throughout my design. I've placed type in perspective, and I'll show you how to create that. I also have little text areas or even framed off areas, and these things either have drop shadows or inner shadows. When I say an inner shadow, basically it means I've got a squared off area or a shape area and my shadow's inside of it, so it looks like it's cut away from that yellow plane. Versus the picture here has a drop shadow and looks like it's on top of whatever's behind it. Other little things look like they're wrapping around other objects. As you do this type of layout, the main thing to remember as far as your elements, make sure everything is balanced, make sure you have a good sense of hierarchy. You should have one main Papa Bear stuff, everything else is secondary, and also make sure your eyes flow through it. Very quickly this stuff can become very cluttered, and most of the time less is more. So if you can do one or just a few elements that have that good plain design, and everything else will just fall within that structure. Not everything has to be in perspective is kind of what I'm saying. If you try to do that, it will not look very good. I've rarely seen it look good that way. Okay, so let's jump in. Let me show you some of the techniques to think about when working in Photoshop. As far as the size of this document, it will be 11 by 17. You can use portrait or landscape. Check out how many layers that I have in this particular document. It's a lot of different layers. Everything on here, all the elements have their own layer by itself. So every rectangle, every bit of text and type, every picture needs to be dealt with. And you need to pay attention to what stacking order that we're working in. This was the one I started on today, so this is the one I'll show you. And I'll work through some of the techniques to give you an idea of what it will look like. Right now I've just got some basic type and I've got a shape that I've created, and I'll work within a blue color scheme to create this. If I wanted to create a three-dimensional box, or in this case I want to put the word art on a wall that's in three-dimensional, here's how I would draw the wall. In Photoshop, we do have some vector elements. You've got your pen tool that works almost the same as in Illustrator. You have your vector selection tools, and you also have your predefined shapes. I'll start off with a rectangle. In the newest version of Illustrator, it treats these shapes a little bit different from the previous versions. Right now I'm working in shape mode. This is the mode we want to work in, so I can change my fill color. Let's make that maybe a light blue. I can change my stroke, points, everything from there. When I click and drag, of course I get my rectangle, but then my properties palette opens up. The new version of Illustrator has what's called a live shape properties. With this, I can do things like give it a beveled edge on the corners. I can change the stacking order of different shapes. I can change up the look and feel of it. In previous versions of Photoshop, this wouldn't be there. So if you're working on an older version, that's going to look different. Here's the main thing. Watch what happens when I try to change my shape. I've got my direct selection tool. I'm going to click on one point and try to drag it in. It's going to give me this error message. If it comes up, there's no problem with it. I'm going to say yes, but it's saying that changing this up is going to take it out of live, live shape mode. I don't have all the options anymore. I don't care about the options, I'm not changing them, so that's why I said okay. But you can see now, very quickly, I can actually make a shape that looks like it's going off into one point perspective, going down that particular way. Let's move it around and place it in where it needs to go. If I wanted to create this into a three-dimensional box, well, this is where my layers are going to come in handy. Let's say I wanted to add a wall or a side to this area. I've got my rectangle as one layer. If I made a copy of it, click and drag it to my new layer. There's my rectangle copy. It's on top of the other one. I'll give it a new color so we know what we're working with. Make it darker. Since this edge is going to be a common edge, I'm just going to move these points. So click on this point and move it over this other point. And very quickly you can see I've drawn off a box shape. Pretty cool. Very easy. Nothing hard about that at all. This I can use as kind of a frame for my structure. I can add more walls onto it. If I wanted to add a wall that's connecting here, or let's put one behind there. Simply make a copy of the shape, and maybe we'll lighten this one up too. And that copy is what I will change for the direction of it, so it looks like it's connecting. And let's put one behind here. Make sure you select the correct layer. In this case, I'll want to select this layer, copy it, and notice what I don't have up here? I can't change my color. Why can't I change my color? What did I lose? Notice what tool I'm using. I've got my Move tool. If I want to change my vector shapes, I've got to use my vector tools down here. When I select my vector tools, now I got my options to be able to change things. And we'll maybe make this one go all the way off the page. I do want to put it behind this one. It's behind there. I need to put it behind my text too. And so now I've got this interesting little wall type structure moving itself around, working with that. Okay, so that's one thing that I can do. Let's put some type onto here. Grab my type tool, art, we'll make it larger. I do need it to be on top of there, so we'll drag it up to the top. And maybe we'll change the type color to white. Okay. I need to put this into perspective. Remember, type is a vector object, technically. If I go to Edit, down to Transform, I can do a couple of different transformations for it. I can scale it and rotate it, skew it. What I really want to do is to distort it. For me personally, I've never had to use the perspective tool. It doesn't work out very well. The distort works. If I use skew, it'll let me do this. So I can move it up and down that way. Is this really in perspective, though? Why not? What am I losing?
It's not vanishing.
Yeah, it's not going to a vanishing point. It's skewed, but it's not giving me that top edge. Here's how to turn on or give access to the Distort tool. My art object is a text layer. I need to convert this to a smart object layer. What do smart objects allow me to do? How would you describe them?
You kind of like change the object without like messing up the initial shape.
Exactly. It does that by making a copy of it. So what I'm going to do to convert it, hold down Control and click, and then convert to Smart Object. Control click does that. Now the icon even changes up. And you're right. Now I can change it up because I'm actually working on a copy of this. You'll see what I mean in a second. If I go to Edit, Transform, now I've got my options for distortion. And it's simply a matter of clicking one edge and letting it fit inside of that area. I can use the edge of my plane to line things up, make it look good. It does tend to jump around. It can become quickly distorted. But hit return and it locks it in. Works pretty good. I could even take off my background and have that just that in perspective, and that looks kind of cool in itself. The downside is if I wanted to make a change to this object, let's say I wanted to change the color of it. Well, if I chose the layer and I went over to my color of my character, let's say I wanted to make it red, it's not going to change the color of it. To change the object itself, I need to open up the original copy. And to do that, you simply double-click on the icon, and it takes you into this mode. Right now, it's on a document by itself, and if I was to change the color now, it does change up. Once I save it, and then close it, it updates the original copy in the layer itself. Did I confuse everybody? That's the essence of working with the smart objects. It's a little bit tedious, but you got to play by its rules. If I did need to change it back, oops, simply double click on the icon, not the other thing. Let's bring it back to white. Save it, close it out. Now it's updated from here. Let's see. Other things you can play around with as far as giving the illusion of depth is, naturally I've got some drop shadows on the back here. I could add a drop shadow to my art. That's part of the layer effects. You can find these either at the bottom here. I love that the new version of Illustrator lets you do multiple drop shadows. You can layer those up. You can make it very subtle, so now it looks like the word art is standing out. Hey, if I did an inner shadow, not inner glow, inner shadow, I would need to play around with the size of it. Now it looks like it's actually being cut away from the board itself. All of that's just an illusion that you're trying to give to it. Another way you can add a sense of depth is by adding some shadows to your walls or your planes that you're working on. Let me lighten up this plane back here. Again, grab your tool. Maybe I did a, maybe not that light. There we go. I can add a shadow back there. I'll turn off this so we can see it. I'm going to double click my layer. I'm going to add a gradient overlay to it. Gradient overlay, in this case you can see, is just a green one, goes from light to dark. Here's the magic trick. I'm going to change it to a black and white. Then I can change my blending mode. Rather than just black and white, if I multiply it, now I get a sense of light and dark from here. If you didn't know this about it, you can also change the angle, and I can click out here, and I can change the starting and stopping point. So now it looks like there's a little bit of a shadow added to that part back there. I could add a shadow to this one. Again, using the gradient overlay. Already got it on multiply. Maybe drop the opacity just a little bit. Move it around. If you don't like the color black, especially since it's on top of blue, maybe I'd change that, double click there, to a darker blue. Yeah, that'll blend up good. All I'm doing is play around. Y'all go away, have fun. Okay, cool. Give it a good sense of three-dimensionality. The other way you can do it, especially if you're working with large blocks of text, is I'm going to add just a regular rectangle. In this case, maybe I'll make it a light blue. Let's use this light blue. And I'll give this one a stroke. Click and drag. Now I've got a rectangled area. Let's make it a little bit thicker stroke. There we go. That'll be a plane I can put type onto. I'll drag my type from the other one here so you don't have to watch me work on it. There's my type. In this case, since I've got my type inside of a text box, it stays in there nice, and I can change up the size of this text box. What's the opposite of type that's not in a text box? What if I just clicked once instead of click and drag? Y'all remember? Point type, bingo. If I use point type and try to paste that, it'd be one long stretch of text to fit there. To give it a sense like it's sitting on top of something, I can double click this, add a drop shadow to it. When I add one drop shadow, you can see it moving along here. It's also moving up here. Do y'all remember why that's happening? Why does the angle of one shadow affecting something on another one? How can I?
It's all coming from one light source.
It's one light source. It's called your global light source. When you turn this on, if you're using a light source on another layer, another object, it'll change it up. If I uncheck it, you can see now it'll move this one, but it doesn't move any other ones. In my case, maybe I want to have just a little bit of a hint of a drop shadow to add to there. If I did an inner shadow, it would look like it's cut through there. May or may not be what you want. So I've placed that on there. There's a sense of plane. Here's a sense of another plane that I can work through. Take it one element at a time. You won't have to watch me redo this. You can do a three-dimensional transformation to pictures. You don't have to convert those to smart objects. Let's place a picture in here. Let's do, if I wanted to place her into here, since I drug her picture directly into here, she will automatically turn into a smart object. But I can go to Edit and Transform, and I've got my distortion as an effect as well. Will automatically distort her picture, and I can add that to the frame. Let me show you why I hate using the perspective tool. Undo that. With perspective, rather than dragging one point, it links up two different points. So it does something like that. And very quickly, it becomes distorted. She's stretched out too far. Even if I try to bring it in, I can't bring in that point. I can move it up or down, but I can't bring things in. Versus if I had the distortion tool, I could actually bring that in and correct the way that looks. I can move one point or another, and it works out well. That's why I like to use the distortion tool. You will never hear me endorse the perspective tool for this one. Okay, that's the basics of it. Let me make sure I went over everything. Adding drop shadows, creating text, make sure it's in a smart object layer, and also create some shapes to give yourself a sense of depth and illusion from here. Any questions so far? Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm going to turn it over to y'all and let y'all continue working through this. When you are finished, you can save your Photoshop files so that you save all the layers to it. So just a regular PSD Photoshop file. When you turn it in, I want you to flatten it, get rid of all your layers, and then save it as a JPEG. And that JPEG is what you will upload to Moodle when you're finished. Okay.